Hello, and welcome back to the Bench to Boardroom podcast. I am your host, Cynthia Steele, and today's guest is Dr. Deva Boone, who is the owner of the Southwest Parathyroid Center. Deva is a medical doctor with a subspecialty or subspecialty in the parathyroid, and she and I met at the University of South Florida as students in the Executive MBA program. I think we met on the first day of class because I was shocked that there was anybody who specialized not just in the thyroid, but in the parathyroid. So Deva and I have a wonderful conversation about having very niche subspecialties. We talk about the benefits of getting an MBA and why getting those types of outside perspectives can actually make you a better business person and a better surgeon. And we also talk a lot about the importance of meeting people where they're at. And that includes utilizing your emotional intelligence to connect with people as much as you can. So without further ado, my interview with Dr. Deva Boone. Dr. Deva Boone, welcome to the Bench to Boardroom podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am so excited to have you. We haven't actually had a chance to see each other in a long time, so it's good to see your face.
Yeah, good to see you as well. How's it going over there on the East Coast?
It's getting hot. It's getting hot here in Florida, but you're in Phoenix, so I can't really complain.
It's even hotter. Yeah.
Well, it's an election year. Everything's always more interesting in an election year.
Yes.
Anyway, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So I am Dr. Deva Boone. I am a parathyroid surgeon. So I'm a very specialized or subspecialized surgeon, and working in Phoenix, Arizona now. I have my own practice, and I've been out of medical school, I don't know, a long time. I've been out of medical school. Jesus, I graduated from medical school a long time ago, 2006. So I've been out a while, and did general surgery residency, did endocrine surgery fellowship. And then since then, for the last 10 years, I've been doing just this very specialized surgery.
That was the thing that actually got me to talk to you for the first time. So as we'll get into, we met at University of South Florida in the Executive MBA program, and hearing that you were a parathyroid surgeon. So as someone who studied anatomy in graduate school, all I remember about the parathyroid is in the anatomy coloring book, there was just these 4 little nodules. And for some reason, it always seemed like in every anatomy book I saw, the thyroid was blue and the parathyroid was pink, and you could barely I don't know why, but you could barely see the difference on histology, and that was always a quick question on the histology exam: which one's the thyroid, which one's the parathyroid. I am blown away that there's people like you who just specialize only in that. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't that many that just specialize in parathyroid, and actually most people probably haven't even heard of parathyroids if they didn't take anatomy. So right. Most of my patients don't even know they have parathyroids until there's a problem with them. Yeah. Because the thyroid gets all the thyroid is like the cute sibling that gets all the attention, and the parathyroid's like the one shoved under the stairs. It's kind of, it just doesn't get the attention that it deserves. But yeah, it's next to the thyroid actually is more of a pink color. And the parathyroids are kind of more orange in color, but they are tiny. They're like the size of a grain of rice, and they're usually sitting around the thyroid, which is why they're called parathyroids.
Yeah. But, yeah. I feel like a lot of my listeners who are pursuing a PhD or even in medical school, like we get kind of, we find ourselves in these rabbit holes, especially PhD students, because, you're interested in a disease state. And then you become interested maybe in a particular cell. And then within that cell, there's a problem with that protein. And within that protein, there's and so I always would laugh when I'd go to these research seminars and they would start by saying, we're talking about spinocerebellar ataxia. And then it's like one subunit of one calcium channel inside one
Right.
subtype of neuron. And it was like,
Right.
wait, hold on, let's take a step back. And so I
Right.
feel like
Right.
your experience getting so excited first with endocrinology, then specifically whittling down to the parathyroid is something that everybody can really appreciate. We all start nerding out about our favorite cells.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I can spend hours and hours talking about the parathyroids.
Mhm.
For your sake, I won't.
Well, that's
But it is my thing. I am really into it. It's
okay.
tricky, like if you're talking about sort of a career path, choosing something that is so subspecialized
Okay.
has its drawbacks, as well as its benefits. So, the benefit is that I can be one of just a few people in the US who do just this operation. So I get
Mhm.
people traveling from all over the world to have surgery with me. The downside is that I really don't have many career other options other than that. And it's very, very hard to kind of get yourself out of that niche once you have established yourself. So there's positives and negatives to that hyper specialization.
That's true. I
Yeah.
spent most of my career in glaucoma, and granted, glaucoma is an enormous disease and it's very common, but I have found myself wondering periodically, should I branch out, within pharmaceutical companies or surgical,
Yeah.
once so that, if I do specialize again in dry eye or in macular degeneration, that actually builds out my portfolio and makes me a little bit more attractive, I guess, to potential
Yeah.
recruiters. And so, yeah, I've
Yeah.
kind of faced something similar, except I
Yeah.
didn't, you know, this is just my work experience.
Right. I mean, it'd be very hard for me to get a job as a surgeon. So, I mean, that's partly why I started my own company. I mean, I love being on my own, but it'd be pretty hard to get a job because I don't really do general surgery. I did training in it, but I haven't seen an appendix in a decade. And so I wouldn't really know what to do if it slapped me in the face. So yeah, so that's a problem.
Yeah,
But currently I'm happy with the situation, but it does limit you.
sure, sure. Were you always interested in medicine?
No.
No? What did you want to do?
No, no. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer.
Mhm.
Still may do that. I still dream of writing books, but um, no. I think I was interested in medicine. Probably the very very common story is you had some early experience with medicine.
Yep.
So my mother was very sick when I was almost 9, and throughout my teenage years, she was very ill with lupus.
Oh,
Then I
sorry.
watched somebody die of AIDS when I was 13. So it's kind of, a lot of hospitals and medicine. And then mix that with sort of the idealism of a college student where I thought I was going to change the world. And I saw all these problems with medicine that I could solve. And,
Hmm.
I was so idealistic back then. It was so cute. But, um, and then I grew up, but yeah, no, I wanted to change things, and I thought I could make this huge difference in medicine, and so that's why I went into medicine. But I didn't really make the decision until junior year of college.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I wanted to be a neurologist because I thought that was cool.
I did too.
And then I did,
Yeah,
yeah, and then I did
me
my
too.
neurology rotation. I was like, absolutely not, because really, you got to see the day to days. You have to. One piece of career advice we always give to doctors is that you can't look at the most interesting aspects of that career. You have to look at the day to day boring crap that person actually has to do. And if you could do the everyday boring crap, then that career is right for you. But if you couldn't, and you only really like the cool stuff, because I really liked, like strokes and like, looking at like Alzheimer's, all this really cool stuff.
Right?
And then you realize that day-to-day neurology is actually back pain and headaches.
Yeah,
And so if you don't want to deal with back pain and headaches all day, then you don't go into neurology.
that
Um,
makes sense.
yes, yes, but I could do small operations every day. I love it. I love operating, and
Nice.
so that's how I became a surgeon. Was
Hmm.
because my surgery rotation in medical school was the only one I really really loved. I could see myself doing the crap every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really fantastic career advice though,
Oh yeah.
for anybody who's thinking, they're finishing up their PhD program, they're finishing up residency, their postdoc, whatever it is, and they're thinking about a particular direction. Yeah, think about if you could do the most boring aspects
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
job, then
Right.
this is the career for you. I love that.
Yeah. Because it really is true. Like I really could do tiny little skin biopsies every day and enjoy it because I like I like
Mhm.
procedures,
Yeah.
and I like getting that stuff done. So I really could do the most boring aspects, but talking to people all day, and I've talked to other doctors because I'm like, how do you do it? How do you like just sit and talk with people all day? Like, how do you manage this? It sounds so exhausting. And they actually enjoy it. Like they're actually like, no, I enjoy seeing my regular patients. As a private, family practice guy, I was like, I love seeing these people through the years. And I'm thinking, I would, I would really hate my life if I had to do that. But they do because that's their bread and butter. That's what they
Sure.
like. And I
Yeah.
think it is good career advice for anybody. Like look at the actual crap that person has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. If that is not going to be your life, then don't do it.
Yeah. And we always lead with the more exciting parts, right? Like
Yeah,
perfect
exactly.
perfect example, medical science liaisons. Everyone's like, "Oh, I love to travel." Well, yes, the travel is cool, and getting
Mhm.
getting credit card points and staying at hotels, whatever, that's like really cool, and my Alaska Airlines miles helped me pay for my honeymoon, which was great,
Nice.
But yeah, there are some very nice perks to that job. But what they don't tell you about is going to conferences in, granted, really beautiful locations, but you are in ballrooms, you are in your hotel room for just to sleep, and then you're up and out the next day, late nights, early mornings, you are talking to people all the time. It is
Yeah.
exhausting. If there's stuff that maybe you don't necessarily agree with, but you have to say because that's what the company wants you to say. I mean, there's so much about it, but everyone only hears about, oh, you get to travel and you get the rewards points and you talk to people and it's so great, but I always appreciate talking to trainees who are like, that sounds like my nightmare. What's
Mhm.
another option? Then we
Yeah.
talk about science writing, we talk about bench research and things that maybe you don't necessarily have to be so front facing or outward
Yeah.
facing.
I mean, and I've so dealt with a few MSLs or medical science liaisons in some companies that I've just worked with peripherally. And I mean, there's a lot of acting to that job. Like they
Hmm.
have to act constantly. They have to act excited. They have to act like they really
Yep.
enjoy you, like they really care what you have to say. I mean, it's kind of like an acting job,
What
really.
it is, yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of it.
I just say,
I
like,
don't
you
know
have to
what
be
they
on.
say about me behind my back, but but I could tell that, there's a lot of acting in it. This is performative, basically.
Yeah, you always have to act excited about the messaging, which I was lucky enough
Mhm.
to get a job at Bausch& and Lomb and about a drug that worked on my particular favorite cell type. So like my excitement was genuine.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think a lot of people could see the difference between,
yeah,
you have to go in and talk about another, plus one drug, oh, we do
right.
the same thing, but better. No, we do the same thing, but better, and
Yeah,
that's where the performance definitely has to come in. And so if that's just
yeah,
something you're not into, then that's definitely
yeah,
not, there are some good perks, but that's definitely not going to be the job for you.
right.
So then, I guess let's talk about the parathyroid. So, for people in my audience who maybe remember coloring it on a coloring book, but that's about it, what is parathyroid disease, and why should we think about the parathyroid?
So I'll just give you a brief overview because
Yeah.
I imagine your listeners might not be that interested in it, but basically the parathyroids are tiny glands on your neck. They were actually discovered in the Indian rhinoceros, which is why some of the gifts people give me are rhinoceros.
Oh,
But
cool.
it was discovered in the Indian rhino. Um, and it was located next to the parathyroid gland. They had no idea what it did,
Mhm.
and so it was called the para next to thyroid. So it doesn't have anything to do with the thyroid, which confuses a lot of people, but nothing to do with the thyroid. It does one thing in your body, and that is regulate calcium. And interestingly, calcium is the only mineral in your body that has its own organ to regulate it. So very, very cool about that. Probably evolved from fish gills, actually, maybe. Um, but yeah, calcium is really, really important in your body, not just for your bones. The bones is the major storage place, but your muscles, your brain, your blood clotting, all of that depends on having a very set range, a narrow range of calcium levels. So your body, your parathyroid glands are always regulating your calcium, keeping it in that range. And when you have a problem with it, typically you have primary hyperparathyroidism, which is what I mostly treat. It's a tumor in one or more of the parathyroid glands. And they're benign tumors, but they cause the parathyroid glands to go a little crazy, make too much hormone. And so you end up with high calcium levels. And this can wreak havoc more than you would expect for just one little mineral to be slightly off, causes all sorts of problems. So,
Wow.
yeah, that's what I do.
Wow. And is
Yeah.
it, so I guess you have four of them.
Yeah.
Does,
The only thing in your body you have four of as well.
that's what I mean. Like the body
Yeah.
built in redundancy. So like
Yeah.
I'm thinking, for example, like the internal and external carotids, when you hear about people who have a blockage, well,
hmm
the brain evolved a structure to have enough redundancy to make sure that the brain always remained,
Always has blood.
always
Yeah.
had blood and oxygen.
Yeah.
And so I'm
Yeah.
thinking about the redundancy here too. You need, I don't know exactly the percentage, but you need a huge clot on like both sides before you actually really start feeling symptomatic, as I understand it. And so for the parathyroid, does like one nodule have to be messed up, or does it have to be
Well,
like
so
three-quarters of
yeah,
them?
it's actually just one, because what happens is it's a problem with making too much hormone or becoming dysregulated. So
Mm,
instead of the normal like response, so normal parathyroid gland will make hormone in response to the calcium level. So if the calcium level's low, it makes more hormone, which raises the calcium. But a parathyroid tumor will not act that way. It will
mm,
just keep making hormone, which keeps that system up without that negative feedback. So
mhm,
without that negative feedback loop to turn off the parathyroid glands, it just keeps going and going. So one parathyroid tumor, usually that's what people have. It's just a single parathyroid tumor. The other three are normal, and actually they become suppressed. So they are basically asleep while
mhm.
this other gland is like going crazy, making hormone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wondered that because I'm thinking back into the cell, you have these redundant proteins, but if one of them is the workhorse and the rest of them either
Right.
don't get transcribed at all or they don't get activated, they just like hang out and wait their turn. So if
Yeah.
you remove that tumor, you remove that one problem gland, everything else goes back to normal.
The immediately kick in and start working again. Yeah.
Wow,
They start
that's
the
awesome.
job and yeah, yeah. Yeah. So it's not really like if you had one parathyroid gland die, for example, you would never know it because the
Hmm,
other three would just make the hormone.
wow,
Um, yeah.
that's really fascinating. What are some of the
Mhm.
most common signs and symptoms of parathyroid disease?
Well, see, that's where it gets interesting because the most common symptom is fatigue, and the next most common symptom is brain fog.
Which we all
So,
have
right.
all the time.
So, and to complicate this, but I will say, if you leave it untreated, it can cause cardiac arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation. It can cause high blood pressure, which can lead to strokes. It can cause kidney failure, kidney stones. It can cause really bad osteoporosis and fractures. It can cause reflux, constipation. It messes with the GI tract. So it does all of these things. But the big symptom that actually affects people's life the most is fatigue. And unfortunately, the demographic is postmenopausal women that are affected the most by this. And
Hmm.
so a lot of times people are ignored. A lot of patients are ignored. They're told that it's just menopause. But this is pretty crippling fatigue. I mean, everybody's tired, yes, but there's a difference. People will often be able to point to when it started. They'll say, I was fine. I was active, normal. And now I can't go a day without taking a nap every time I get home.
Wow.
Like it's different.
Mhm.
And I have to explain this to endocrinologists too. I'm like, don't just discount somebody who says they have new fatigue because often they are. Doctors can be very dismissive
True.
of their patients, and it's insulting. Honestly, it's not helpful. But they're very dismissive, especially of postmenopausal women.
Mm,
So I think a lot of times that's why patients like me so much is because one, I take them seriously. I'm the first one to tell them that actually there is a reason why you feel so tired, and then I can make it better. And it's sort of amazing when you do this operation, within a few weeks, most people are feeling that energy come back. They're not sleeping it all the time. They're waking up more refreshed. Their
Mhm.
brain is clearer. So
Wow.
it's pretty incredible. Yeah.
I can see why this would be such a rewarding career path.
Exactly.
You talk to people, like I remember I was on a plane sitting next to a cataract surgeon, and she said to me, like, oh, glaucoma, never. Like that, it's always a battle. There's just the next thing and the next thing. That pressure
Right.
never really goes down. Your patients get older, other things
Right.
happen to them. This is, as we've been saying, it's like a lifelong relationship with those
Yeah.
patients. She said, nope, I go in, I take the cataract out, the patient sees, they're thrilled, and bye-bye.
Bye. Yep.
Next
Yep.
patient, and I
Yep.
so do you have patients that have to come back, or usually once you operate, they check in with you
For
every 12 months and that's it?
so I get labs about 6 weeks, and oftentimes that's kind of it. They can go on their way after that. Um, Most of the time, you don't ever need a second operation
Mhm,
because I look at all four parathyroid glands when I'm in there.
mhm,
And the most common reason why somebody would need a second operation is that they have a second tumor that's not evaluated. And that's just, I can look at all four because I do this all the time and I'm experienced. But most surgeons doing this operation are not very experienced, so they will only go after a tumor that's seen on the scan. I don't need a scan. I don't even care if all the scans are negative. I know you have this based on your labs. Like that's how we diagnose it. And so I
mhm.
go in blindly, look at all four parathyroid glands and figure it out. Whereas a lot of surgeons will not do that. They'll only look at one gland. If you do that, there's a fair chance that the person will not be cured because they may have a second tumor, and that occurs in maybe 30% of patients. So, you know, that's why people travel to me,
Yeah, right?
honestly. I mean, because I'm really good at this, and I can
Wow,
usually get people cured the first time.
that's amazing. That is,
Yeah.
wow, that's so cool. So you love operating, and the parathyroid's your jam. Why did you get an MBA?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I was at a center of surgeons, and it was the only other center in the U.S. that just does parathyroid surgery. At the time, it was the only one.
Mhm,
And still, I came out here, and I was in Tampa. I was the medical director, so I was pretty, having a lot of success there. And you know, there were multiple reasons for getting the MBA. One is I just really love learning things. So it was kind of a fun thing to do, but I was a full-time surgeon. So it was a
mhm.
bit of a time commitment. And I had two young kids at the time, and my husband, but I basically did it because I thought, if I'm moving forward, it is helpful. Like it's always going to be useful to have this. I was thinking at the time that I might want to go into hospital administration.
Mm,
So that is always helpful. So if I wanted to go and be a chief medical officer or something like that, this would be helpful. That's, I think, why I originally did it. It's hard to remember because it's been a few years now,
yeah.
and
And that was
my
before
reasons have
COVID too.
changed. Before COVID, yeah, exactly.
Everything was
So
different before COVID.
yeah. Plus, my thoughts on it have changed.
Mm,
At the time, I was thinking become a chief medical officer, maybe. And I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life. And I was getting a little bit burnt out from surgery. So I was kind of thinking of quitting surgery entirely. And actually,
mm,
that's what I ended up doing.
mhm,
Uh, when I was for the last year of my MBA, or during that year, because it was 2 year program. First year I did when I was like at the height of my career there, basically, and then I quit during the second year. And I was, I quit surgery. I thought I'm not gonna do operating anymore. Maybe I'll
mhm.
go into some sort of admin position or something in the business of medicine. And I figured the MBA would be really helpful.
Yeah. I'm having a flashback to your group was up giving a presentation, and I don't remember which class it was in, but I remember you looking at your phone, and you like called everything to a halt. You said, I'm so sorry. I operated yesterday. This is a patient. And the teacher was like,
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, it's true. Every patient gets my cell phone number. And so if there are any issues, people will call me. And
Mhm,
I think that they, it ended up not being an emergency, but it's always helpful for patients to get your cell phone. I would tell that any surgeons listening,
Mhm,
it's like a magic trick. Give them your cell phone number. They
mhm.
call you way less than you think they will. They're
Mm,
usually very respectful.
true. I
Yeah.
Actually, I had gum grafting done like 2 years ago or something, just like this whole bottom row of gums needed to be
Oh
replaced,
yeah.
and that that was actually a very cool procedure, but that doctor gave me his cell number, and he
Oh
said, "Look,
nice.
you're gonna be bruised, you're gonna be swollen, it's all gonna be painful, but feel free to text me," and I did at
Yeah.
one point. I texted him and said, "Hey, this is happening," and he called me like right away. I was so surprised.
Yeah.
He called me
Yeah.
right away, and yeah, yeah, Cynthia, that sounds normal. You can always, take some more Advil or whatever, and you'll be fine. But
Yeah.
that was it. Actually, really did make a big difference. Like, oh wow,
Oh yeah.
thank you,
Oh
Dr.
yeah.
Rick. That's so appreciative. I was
Yep.
so appreciative of that.
Oh yeah. No, it's
Mhm,
it's a big thing. And yeah, we can get into how the business degree might help, but I think
mhm,
partly getting the degree is helpful because it helps you see other solutions to things and see other ways of solving things. And surgeons are so conditioned to never give out their cell phone number. When I tell surgeons, they are like on the floor shocked that I give everyone my cell phone number
wow.
because it is so unheard of.
Yeah.
Well, think about it. I mean, think about like I didn't see a primary care doctor for the first 3 years I moved here because I could never like reach their office. I would call and it would just ring and ring,
Hmm.
and I can't be on hold for 5 minutes. So we don't think about kind of the patient experience, but I do. I think about the patient experience. It is very calculated. I mean, it's how the patient finds me, fills out the forms. I have done the form in a certain way to give
Hmm.
them a certain experience. So you have to think about all of that. And giving your cell phone is one more thing. It actually is really good for healthcare too, because a lot of times patients, when anything goes bad, if they're or any even not bad, but they have an unexpected symptom that they feel
Yeah.
afterwards,
Yeah.
that might be nothing, and I can calm them down with a 30-second call or a text. But if I didn't do that, they might go to the ER. I mean, there are patients
Right.
who, they get very, very anxious after surgery, understandably, and they aren't sure if something's normal,
Hmm.
and they'll rush to the ER. Well, I can prevent them from going to the ER by calling them, or if they call me or text me. So it's really, really helpful to
Yeah.
give out my cell phone. Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic point about thinking about the patient experience because even as scientists, we're always looking to target the root cause. Same
Hmm.
as you. We're going to go right to
Yeah.
the root of the problem. We're going to fix it, and God be the way. But we aren't trained to think about the patient experience. Is this going to burn? Is it going to itch? How often will you have to administer this treatment? How long acting is this? There's so many other things about what happens in the translational component of science and then beyond once it gets into the clinic, that I think so
Yeah.
many people don't even think about. And on top of that, it's also thinking about what the current like state of the industry, state of the science is, and how will your treatment actually help? Because at least let's take something like depression, for example. I mean, there's so many therapeutic options for this now, and every drug is going to say, well, we do that, but better, but we do that, but better. But do you cause insomnia? Do you cause dizziness? Do you cause, there's so many other things to think about outside of the cell and the organ that you're working in. So just trying to bring it back to the people who are in grad school right now or thinking about a career in translational science. That's always something to consider.
Yeah, I think, and you're thinking about it a lot more than most doctors do. And that's, I think, one of the problems with medicine is that
Mhm.
doctors are pretty disconnected from the patient experience and the
Yeah.
patient journey. And I'm sure in your industry, you think about it a lot more. Like, how is this patient going to even find a doctor who
Yeah,
will prescribe this? Like, you have to think about that.
absolutely.
Whereas doctors don't, a lot of times, they don't think, how is the patient going to find me? How do I get them to build trust? Because one of the things, one of the hardest part about my job, it's not the operation. Those are kind of my break days. It's getting people to trust me, getting people to travel across the country or across the Atlantic to have surgery with me. I mean, I have to convince them. And so I've got to build trust online.
Mhm.
Um, Same way you do. Like if you're developing a drug, developing anything, like you've got to develop trust. And from this, doctors have to trust you and the patients have to trust you to some
Totally.
extent. So,
Totally.
it's that issue of kind of understanding what the patient is going to go through to find you, to use your product. And we don't think about that as doctors. And that's one of the benefits of business school, is to actually see things from a different point of view, see problems in a different way.
Mhm.
And I think, one of the questions you had asked was kind of like, what did you learn from business school? It's hard to say, honestly. Looking back, I learned a lot, and I love it. And I think one of the big benefits was actually getting the confidence that I could do this, that I could just go and start my business, because I started a business. I mean, it's a startup, and I treat this like a lean startup,
Mhm.
legitimately like a lean startup. So I think, business school gave me the confidence to say, like, okay, I can do this, because, business is not really as hard as I thought it was. You're given this sense of like, oh, there's these people who just know business and they know it, like, and that's BS. This is all stuff you can learn, and it's
Totally.
not that hard. If you've gotten a PhD, you can understand this stuff.
You
Like,
pass your boards exams, you can do
yeah, you
that.
can 100% understand basic business concepts. It's
True.
not that hard.
Truly.
But
Although
and I think,
I did make our friend Melissa explain accounting to me like I was a high school freshman, because some
yeah,
of those
no, accounting, I'm
were
not, I mean, I'm okay with accounting, but like I mostly, and I learned too that, you don't need to know a ton about accounting.
Mhm.
I manage all my finances on an Excel spreadsheet. And I was a little bit embarrassed to admit that, because I was like, yeah, I really, like, I don't want to deal with QuickBooks and all that. I had QuickBooks and that. I look at an Excel spreadsheet, and I track all my expenses and my incoming revenue,
Mhm.
over time, month by
Mhm.
month. And it's really easy for me to do it that way. And Excel's actually pretty good at it. And so
Awesome.
I went to an accountant to do my taxes, and I said, yeah, I was like, I know it's an Excel file. And I loved him, because he was this older guy. And he's like, well, if it's working, so what?
Love that.
Unless you're a big business. I'm a small business. I've got 3 employees,
Mhm.
I don't need really expensive software,
Right.
accounting software. I can just do it on an Excel file and keep track of it. And
Perfect.
at one day it won't work anymore, and I'll actually get something else. But
Yeah.
for now, yeah, I think knowing that, like, okay, it doesn't need to be complicated. Like, this can actually be pretty simple.
Sure.
Like, you can actually just track your expenses on an Excel spreadsheet and do your budgeting on an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
At least in the beginning, you don't need to make it harder than it is.
Makes sense.
Um, and yeah, and I think I learned that from business school too, was that sometimes people who, when you're in the doctor's lounge, I have to stop myself, because I was going to say something kind of offensive. I was going to say was that there are a lot of older men,
Mhm.
especially surgeons, who think that they're really good at playing the stock market.
Uh-huh.
And it's sort of hilarious listening to them, because maybe they have business degrees, but I doubt it. But I listen to them, and I'm like, okay, like,
Right.
put your money in an index fund and walk away. And that was the financial advice I always like thought was legit. And then med school, or the business school, taught me that, yes, that is pretty legit. That's a
Yeah.
legit way
Yeah.
of saving your monies. Index fund, walk away.
Totally.
But yeah, if you're around a lot of these, like, very confident, especially white, especially older men,
Mhm.
you come to think that there's some, like, secret society or secret understanding in business that you don't know.
Right.
And then you find out there isn't. There's an old boys club, but there's nothing all that's,
Yeah.
exceptional about
Yeah.
it. It's just that they support each other because they're also old white men.
I follow, I think it's called Girls That Invest on
Hmm.
Instagram, and I think her name is Simran Kaur. She wrote a book on it too, and it was exactly that. Like, there's no secret meetings. There's no,
Right.
magic, whatever. Just you just start.
Right.
and
Right.
maybe you talk to a financial advisor, maybe you do some of your own internet research, but this is not a secret world that you're not invited to. Just invite yourself and just start doing
Right.
it. And
Maybe we should cut out the thing about the.
we could,
We should cut that out. Cut that out.
that's fine. I
I'm
honestly
very
don't,
careful about how I appear online.
on, on this podcast, we talk a lot about the privilege of old white men, though, because it's kind of
Okay, well
everywhere.
that's it. And there is a privilege to like having that confidence,
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
definitely that there's we're swimming in a privileged world. And
Totally.
if you don't recognize that there are people with a lot more privilege um, sitting right next to you, and they're
Hmm.
going to come with different assumptions and different confidence levels. And sometimes you have to realize that they don't know it more than you. They really don't.
Exactly. And that, well,
Yeah.
and that's why that ends up being a large part of the conversation here, because, you go to meetings and you look at the podium and it's usually the same, group of speakers. It's mostly white
Hmm.
speakers, a lot of male speakers. You
Yep.
you go to these dinners, promotional things. The same doctors are usually on the speaker circuit, you know,
Yep.
and and you're right. There's so much confidence and they come off being so confident about themselves. But one of my favorite things to do as an MSL, when a doctor would come in and kind of try to, put some swagger on, I would introduce myself and say, I have a PhD in trabecular meshwork cell biology, and just watch their jaw drop. Very cool. You've done a bunch of surgeries. You've prescribed a bunch of drugs. I spent 15 years living in like what, a 10 micron space, sort of 360
Yeah.
around the eye. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah.
to you want to talk science, or do you want to just be a blowhard? And that actually
Yeah.
always worked really, really well, because if you meet them where they're at, rather than acting kind of meek and subservient, which I think a lot of they expect, they really do
Yeah.
expect that a lot of women are going to do
Especially even, yeah, in women. I mean, it's
that.
very
Hmm.
much, I
Hmm.
mean, this is surgery. This is male dominated.
Yes. Yes.
And so as a female surgeon, you have to prove yourself 10 times over
Mhm.
to get some of the same respect from them.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating. It definitely is. But yeah, I don't know what the solution is.
But, but,
It's like,
but Eva, you're going back to what you were saying, how you actually take your patients seriously. You
mhm,
know,
yeah,
that
yeah,
that's the way to beat them at
yeah.
their own game, rather than, oh, you're tired. Yeah, drink a cup of tea. Drink a cup of coffee.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Or exercise more, or lose weight, or yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah. And that
You're
may all help. That all will help, but it's not going to treat your issue. But
mhm.
yeah, I mean, it is, on an individual level, it's kind of, yeah, I do take them serious, and that is why my patients love me. I think is that, like, I do take them seriously. When I do my Facebook lives, I'm not condescending.
Yeah.
I I do respect people, um, and in some ways, though, that has made it more challenging because I don't have that arrogant attitude. And you see other men with that arrogant attitude, and it gets them far.
Mhm.
It certainly gets you far in the world of medicine. I know, women who act really confident um, in the OR are possibly treated a little differently than
Mm.
men. When I was in training, I remember, if a female surgeon, complained about something in the OR, it was really looked at as a negative. It was not a good thing. But I watched grown white men throw tantrums, like literal tantrums in the OR. And there were no negative consequences. They got what they wanted. And and that was I mean, that was a few years ago, but I doubt that it's changed considerably because a lot of them are still operating.
Yeah.
So I think things are changing slowly. It's not
Mhm.
as acceptable to throw a tantrum in the OR. Now, if you throw instruments, you really, you get a wrist slap at least.
I
um,
would hope so.
but yeah, so it's not as accepted, and things are changing. I think the world always is getting better slowly.
Mhm.
Things are changing for the better. but it was definitely, in surgery, it was definitely an uphill battle being female and going through all of this.
Hmm.
And none of the male surgeons would really understand. They don't get it. They don't see it because they're swimming in their own privilege.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah.
But so going back to talking about how how you gain trust with your patients, let's talk about some of your online activities, because
Yeah.
again, if you're going to come off as, maybe you don't want to come across as overconfident, but you instead come across as someone who cares and someone who's available, which I think is kind of a superpower.
Well,
Especially,
you have to come across as confident, though. I
well,
mean, I
of
come
course, I'm not
across,
saying not, but
I try to finally, you know, um, kind of straddle the line between confidence and arrogance,
yeah,
because
yeah.
people like arrogant surgeons.
Hmm.
They like arrogant surgeons, and so they think that at some point you have to be a little bit arrogant because people trust that.
Sure.
I see comments online. Recently, I saw a Reddit a Reddit discussion that somebody sent me. It was what makes a great surgeon, and it was a general surgery resident, asking this in a residency thing, and so many non-surgeons answered, which I thought one was hilarious,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
how do you know? But a lot of the people will say things like, well, you don't want your surgeon to be too nice, you want them to be good in the OR, as if you can't have both.
Right.
It's like that's making an assumption that anybody who's a jerk to you in the pre-op area is going to be a great surgeon. That usually is not the case.
Hmm.
If they're a jerk in the pre-op, they could be a complete ass in the OR as well, and they may not do a great operation. So, but it's funny that people kind of think that way. They always will say stuff like, "Well, I just want somebody who's technically good. I don't care if they're a jerk." But really, being a jerk does not equate to technical prowess at
Yeah.
all. Um, but it's really, really hard to judge anybody in their surgical abilities without actually watching them operate, which is why I never want to have an operation in my life. I just avoid surgery because you never know how good they are.
Yeah.
Um, but I think my results, I think, can speak for themselves. I do have a lot of people online who have had surgery with me and can talk about it. But when I do my online outreach, because that's how people find me, they
Mhm.
find me online. But the way I do that, I mean, I have to show a level of confidence that is very high. And
Yeah.
I'm okay with that because I am pretty confident in my abilities with this disease. So,
You have the data on your
so
side too.
yeah, so
Like,
very confident, and then but also very knowledgeable and very down to earth.
yes.
You have to have people trust you. They're not going to get on a plane and have
Right.
surgery with you unless they trust you.
Right.
So it's so important to get that trust established, and you can do that. You
Mhm.
really can do that with Facebook Live,
Wow.
um, because I've shown that you can.
So how does
Yeah.
that work? If you're working on building this confident, trustworthy brand online, how did you start?
So actually, when I was in my last job, I took every opportunity to do any online thing that was
Mhm.
available,
Okay.
and I would encourage everybody to do this, even if you don't have to get patients. The more you can sort of build your brand, the better.
Mhm.
And so I was obviously kind of advertising for my other place. I was part of them, but my name was there. I would say my name every time, and so some of those people, they still find videos of me when I was at my last place, and they want to find me specifically because of that, and they'll
Huh.
come to me specifically. So I got every opportunity, and so if there was a Q&A online, I would do it. People just love videos. Videos are just incredible. they
Oh.
they like watching videos more so than anything else, and that's why things like Instagram, Facebook, they prioritize videos. People like videos.
Hmm.
And what I realized was you don't need a nice setup. You don't need a nice background. You don't need nice lighting. You don't need a fancy microscope. People don't care about that, at
Mhm.
least when they're coming for a doctor. They actually really like if you're kind of down to earth. So the Facebook Lives, when I started, they were so unprofessional. I mean, I look at them now and I'm like, oh my God, I sound terrible. The lighting's off, everything's wrong. But it doesn't matter because they're not looking for that. It's almost better in some cases if you don't look quite as polished, if it looks like you're kind of sitting in your home office and just chatting. So for doctors, at least, I don't know about you probably need to look a little more professional, but when talking to patients, sometimes it helps to be just that down to earth doctor.
Sure. Well, because otherwise, I think if it looks too slick, if it looks too well
Yeah.
produced,
Yeah.
it does
Yeah.
kind of give you the feels a little bit,
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, like with the pharmaceutical industry, like,
Hmm.
pharmaceutical ads are slick, and that's good in a way, but also like it makes you think, they're hiding something, like they're they're washing over something, they're
Uh-huh.
missing some of the
Yeah,
facts.
my trick.
It's
Hmm.
it's just too slick.
Agreed.
And if you actually, sometimes the smart things they will do is like have patience. And this is actually as an MSL, I'm sure like one of the smartest things you can do. One of the companies I work with is for hypoparathyroidism, so it's the opposite problem. But I've worked with them because I have patients come to me asking for help managing this, and so I do help them manage it. It's more of a like medication management,
Mm.
but there is an injectable drug being developed that is like very, very necessary. So I have dealt with this company, and trying to help them kind of, and I feel like the way I can help them is by helping them like reach patients. Like
Mm.
what do you do on Facebook? What apps do you put out? Because it's not always obvious to them. And it's not always obvious that the slickest looking video you can produce might not be the most effective for making patients trust you.
Sure.
But one thing they do really well is that they get lots of patient interviews. And so a lot of their videos are like just the patients with it talking about their experiences. And that's like brilliant, of course.
Yeah.
Sometimes even that's a little too slick. And I wonder if maybe if they like made it a little bit rougher, that it actually might be a little more believable.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
anyway.
how did you come up with these ideas? Is it just a trial and error, or did you recognize like patients actually want someone to talk to? So I'm going to start doing these Facebook Lives. Like, how did this stuff start getting built in your mind?
Um, my boss was very attuned. My former boss,
Mhm.
it's my own boss now, but
Right.
my former boss was very attuned to this stuff in
Mm.
how you develop trust. And he was very smart about people when it came to people, about these little things that you do. For
Mhm.
example, when I started working there, one of the things that he emphasized was when you go out to talk to, after you do the operation, you go out and you talk to the family.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said was, you always take off your mask and your hat and you always sit down to talk to them.
Ah.
Always, every time, because this sends a message. If you just pull your mask down and you walk out there and you stand over them,
Right. Yeah.
that's what most surgeons, and I watch it. That's what happens with most surgeons. They just kind of pull it down. They go out there. They're standing above the patient. Like, yep, she did great. Wait. And it sends a much different message if you take everything off and you sit down. Even if you only sit for 10 seconds, because I've kind of counted it sometimes. I'm like, I'm not sitting for very long, but you're sitting next to them and you say, everything went great. She's doing well. She's just waking up.
Mhm.
It's the same message, but it's interpreted very differently.
Because you're face to face.
In that first one where I'm standing over you, I don't have time for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I sit down, that means I do have time. And when I'm talking to patients, beforehand, I always talk to the patients. I never stand above them asking questions. That's what everybody else does. That's what most doctors do. They'll be standing at the desk because they have a rolling desk. They'll be standing at the desk, looking down at the patient, going, "Okay, so let's talk about what's going to happen." And like, I will spend an extra 5 minutes searching for a chair, and I bring it next to the patient and I sit down every single time.
Wow.
It's those things. It's those little things about the patient experience that really
Mhm.
changes how they think of you in a way that they probably wouldn't even recognize. Like they're not
Sure.
consciously thinking, "Oh, I'm really glad she sat down," because that really builds trust. Like they're not thinking that, obviously. Like they're not even focused on, but in their mind, it's clicking. And,
Yeah.
I'm sure as an MSL, you're doing these little tricks too.
Yeah.
Like, I watch them because I go to these meetings and the MSL will talk to me and I watch the tricks they're doing. Like,
Mhm.
they're doing the same thing. They're always sitting next to me. They always will start the conversation. They're salespeople. They're not salespeople,
That's
but they're not salespeople. But you know what I mean? Like, they want to get to know what my issue is so
Mhm.
that they can help me, which is kind of classic sales, right? Like, that is, find out the pain points. So find out why I would care about this. What are my pain points in dealing
Mhm.
with these patients? Who would I deal with? And then how can they help me kind of understand the disease or understand what they're working on?
Mhm.
Which is, and not just the MSL. The MSL is kind of more advanced, but you first talk with just like sort of the reps or whatever.
Yeah.
And the reps are really good at selling, and
Yeah.
that's what their focus is. But their focus really is like getting to know me, and so they're
Mhm.
doing all this stuff. Like, they're
Mhm.
they're getting right next to me, and um, but people don't realize that like all that stuff works on patients too. It's not really any different. There's a lot of similarities.
But see, this is interesting, because you're exactly right. I kind of imagined both scenarios as you were describing them. The doctor comes in, standing over the patient. Oh yeah, your mom did great. Everything's fine. All right, thank you. Blah blah blah. Moving on. Versus, yeah, you coming in, taking your cap off, taking your mask off, sitting down. Now we're peers. Now,
Yep.
now we're just two people
Yep.
versus, I am
Yep.
taller than you, I am
I'm the
bigger than
doctor.
you,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? There's
Yep.
something very imposing in a way like that,
Yeah.
but that's more imposing body language. And I'm
Yep.
I'm thinking back to like graduate school or just any leaders that I've had in different businesses, and the people that I've related to the best are the ones who really do have that level of emotional intelligence. We talk about that a lot on this podcast because that's not something that's taught in grad school.
Yeah.
That is not like communication and
Yeah.
EQ and body language is not taught in grad school. It's just all about doing your bench research, doing it well, getting your result, communicating it
Yeah.
with as much brevity as you can, as efficiently
Yep.
as you can, and moving on. So
And that's medicine too. I mean, it's
yeah.
the same thing. You're focused on this thing.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep.
Mhm. But if you want to go into business, now you have to start observing body language, like you were just saying. You have to see
Yep.
what works, what doesn't work. And if you think about it from other people's perspectives. And so if you go to talk to a customer and you sit down with them, or you
Hmm.
work on building trust because you have these videos online that shows that you are in fact a subject matter expert, or but also, here's a picture of me with my dog. I'm a normal human being, and
Yep.
it's
Yeah.
having those kinds of skills makes you a much much better, I'll say much much better employee, but it'll make you a better leader. It'll make you just much more effective in whatever career path you're going at, because you can meet people where they're at,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you've known people like this too, because I always go back to one person I worked with a long time ago who was brilliant. I mean, just so smart, absolutely perfect on paper, but his EQ was like zero.
Yeah.
He, like, if you would tell him like, okay, I have 5 minutes, I mean, 15 minutes later, he's still talking. I would see people like walking away, and he's still walking after them and talking. And we're like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
those skills. I mean, I think they can be taught. You can learn them, but you have to be
Right.
open to figuring that out.
Yes, you have to be open, and you have to consciously do it. You have to
Yeah.
consciously get better. And
Hmm.
that's how I got good at this operation. Was what makes a great surgeon really, it's consciously finding ways to get better every day and
Yeah.
focusing on that.
Well,
And that's how I got good at the operation. That's how I'm getting better with dealing with patients and with people in general.
mhm.
But yeah, I think in business, the relationships are so important. They're so key. And a lot of scientists, a lot of doctors aren't taught that because it's not part of the core curriculum of medicine. It's not, now I think medical schools are sort of recognizing that it's really important, but it's still not like, it's not as important as memorizing the disease process
Right.
and memorizing the cells involved. Like, that's much more important.
Of course.
But if you're going to actually treat medicine, and I mean, medicine is a business, right? Like, and partly, part of the problem with medicine right now is that a lot of doctors have given up a ton of autonomy. They have let the business leaders, meaning like the MBAs, take over medicine. Our
Mm.
hospital CEOs are not doctors.
Right.
And the main executive team is not made of doctors. It's made of people with MBAs. And we've sort of given up a lot of that, and we gave it up because a lot of us didn't know any better. Doctors in general want to be doctors. They don't
Mhm.
they don't want to deal with this stuff. They don't want to be in business. But we need more doctors going into hospital admin and leadership roles. That was partly why I did the MBA, although that's obviously not what I ended up doing. But
Not yet. Not yet, at
yeah,
least.
who knows? Who knows? But yeah, you never know. It always helps. But yeah, all of this stuff, I think that having confidence and then having the ability to deal with people and to
Mhm.
consciously get better at it, because I'm an introvert and I'm very introverted. I find it exhausting, being in a crowd of people after a while. But interestingly, I love doing Facebook Lives, even though they're somewhat exhausting.
Really?
But I love presenting. Yeah,
Huh.
I love doing this stuff. Even though, yeah, I'm kind of introverted, and I think a lot of this stuff, yeah, I did have to learn. When he taught me, sit down, take off it. Yeah, it seems obvious in retrospect, but so few doctors do it, and it makes a huge difference. And I only learned it like after I'd finished all my training.
Yeah.
So
Now,
yeah.
I was going to ask you, does posting make you nervous?
Um. No.
Okay.
No. In what sense? I'm very. If I'm just posting about parathyroid disease, I used to be. I think it gets like anything. It gets much easier every time you do it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Every time you do something, you get more comfortable. I know, like in my early videos, I wasn't really that comfortable. You can see that I'm a little uncomfortable. Now it's just natural. I just turn it on and I just talk to myself for an hour, and and I'm okay with doing that. Um, and but I think in the beginning, it was more just uncomfortable a little
Yeah.
bit. But like posting on Instagram and that kind of stuff, I mean, I'm making all my stuff that I post
Mhm.
so in Canva. Just plug for Canva there. It's a great
Oh,
software.
okay.
um but yeah, so I make all that stuff, and I think that I'm very private in other ways, so I do get a little bit paranoid posting anything that is in any way political. And honestly,
Mhm.
I wish that I weren't so paranoid about it, but I'm extremely paranoid about that,
Mhm.
because you never know how people will interpret things. But on my
Right.
business website, there's nothing anything controversial at all.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
Now, I asked because, as we were talking before we started recording, trying to build my brand now is a little bit of a difficult process because on one hand, I mean, I already have a full-time job, but I do want to grow
Mhm.
the podcast, and I personally just find it mentally exhausting to be thinking about creating content, making it novel, making it interesting enough. Does is my mascara bleeding onto my cheekbones? And I mean, there's a million different things that I end up, and I suffer from this all the time, paralysis by analysis. That was
Yeah.
something my boss called me out on it in grad school because I was so bad at writing
Yeah.
grants because I would always talk myself out of things. And
Yeah.
it's something that I need to just break out of and just start doing. And so I get nervous every time I
Yeah.
post something, every time I, make a video talking about a paper that I read or whatever. Um, and so I just was curious, as someone who is more introverted than I am. I mean, putting yourself out there like that, but doesn't bother you. That's amazing.
For this stuff it doesn't, cuz I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is, and like I think if I had to post something where I wasn't as sure about, like I see some doctors on social media like posting, like they'll do a reaction video for something and they have no idea what they're talking about. There's this one guy, was like, he put up this video And he's like, this man has a large goiter. And he clearly had like a mass coming from down here, like clearly not a goiter, like your thyroid's here.
Uh-huh.
But I was just like, how do you have the confidence to go on there and say something that's so wrong? Like that's just wrong.
Yeah.
But I think with parathyroid disease, I know it so well that I trust myself to not really screw up too badly. But I would get paranoid in the past. Like if I was saying something, if I didn't say it correct, like if I said it and I was like, oh, that could be misinterpreted, or I need to qualify that, because I'll spend a lot of time. It's like somebody will say, well, what's a normal calcium level? Well, I could spend the next hour qualifying my answer. Well, in this case, you could see this, and well, okay, but unless you and so if I make a statement like this is a normal calcium, I get very nervous that will be misinterpreted because I haven't had a chance to like qualify everything. So I kind of know what you're saying. Like I do the same thing where I don't want to, post it. And I have had the experience of like posting on Facebook, like, cause you have to give it in bites, to like little sound bite, like, and so it's very hard for me to boil down this disease, which to me is like so much, like boil it down to tiny little sound bites. And when I do, there's always somebody who misinterprets it.
Oh, no.
Like I'll make a statement. It's like categorically true. Like it's true. It's like high blood calcium is usually caused by parathyroid disease.
Yeah.
Like that's a true statement. It's just true. Like there's no, but then like the first comment will be like, well, yeah, but I had calcium and I had cancer. It's like, okay, well that, that doesn't negate my statement,
Right.
but like
we're usually is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and that's
like, and I could also like qualify, my inclination is to qualify everything to say, okay, high blood calcium is usually caused by a parathyroid tumor. Although you have to look at all things and consider, you have to look at the PTH level and the vitamin D, and you have to make sure that you're not taking too many vitamin D supplements, and you have to make sure that you're, and you have to rule out, okay, but then it's a whole paragraph, and then it's not suitable for Instagram. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, okay, I get it. You had cancer and you had high, but that's not, and so, and that kind of thing will get to me, and you have to learn to like not respond.
Sure.
Because like you're never going to win online. Like you've already lost, and I think I take that mentality of like, you're never going to win an online argument. Don't try.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. Just kind of stick with what's true and try to help people, try to post things that are true and that, may guide people. But don't argue online. It's not worth it.
No.
That's what I tell to anybody posting online. Yeah.
Now, I think it's an interesting discussion to have about the outside, like the academic benefits of getting an MBA, because when I started talking to people in my previous job about going to graduate school or going back to graduate school, one of them said, similar to you, like, well, you're a learner. You're a book person. You like that stuff. And that is very much me. I like having an agenda and a curriculum, and these are my books and these are my tasks, like I learn better that way. A lot of people have said, look, a lot of these things you can learn organically. A lot of these things you can learn online, or there's probably some kind of free course that you can take, like in project management. There's tons of courses that are not free, but you can take project management courses, etc., to learn how to do these things. And it's not about that. Certainly, I think when we think about the people that we had in class, that we learned even more from them in some ways in some of the courses than we did from our teachers, because we're coming at the problem from such different perspectives that, as you're saying, that gives you that kind of outside, that academic benefit, because now you are next to advertising executives and people who do accounting for a living, and people who are also MDs, and people who are construction folks, and they own these companies, and you're just like, okay, you have a totally different perspective on this from me, based on your experience running your teams versus, me working with my teams. It's that part, I think, actually was probably the most beneficial of all, is to learn how to learn how to think about situations from so many different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and that I think was a good part about the executive part of it, was everybody was working, everybody was already in their careers, but even just like taking these courses that I normally would never take. Like I had read some business stuff, before getting an MBA, right? These kind of pop business books that are questionable, but
Yeah.
and I had done some of that. But when you're forced to take courses on, for example, like operations and
Yeah.
logistics and that kind of stuff, and you have to look at things in a whole new way. Like, even when we had to calculate how many checkout cashiers you'd need during the Christmas rush at,
Yes.
a gift store, that's really, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting the way that they've looked at this problem, because
Hmm.
hospitals have a huge problem with like getting patients to places on time and getting them
Hmm.
out of the hospital quickly and efficiently and getting them to their scans at the time. Like, it's a huge issue. And yet I've never heard of anybody talk about it in the same way, but it's essentially the same
Same
problem.
problem.
You're
Hmm.
dealing with getting people through a process. And so it was really, really interesting, because I think in a lot of in the healthcare world, a lot of people will get these, a master's in healthcare administration or other degrees that are really focused on healthcare. And I think that is, actually maybe not as good as getting a generic MBA course where you're exposed to something like that,
Yeah.
where you wouldn't necessarily, I'm never going to be calculating how many cashiers I need,
Right.
at a gift store, but knowing that that problem can be approached that way, I might apply it to how we allocate beds in the hospital.
Yeah.
Because if you're all coming from the same education, you're all going to come up with the same answers. And I
Right.
think that's kind of a problem in medicine. It's like we all have the same issues with patient care, but we're all going at it the exact same way. So we're all coming up with the same solutions, which
Hmm.
makes you feel like you're smart, but you're not, because you're not actually coming up with anything new.
Right. Right.
You're not looking at it in a new way. You're looking at it exactly the way that everybody else is looking at it,
Hmm.
and so the problem continues because nobody can come up with something unique.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think from my perspective, I hadn't worked in an office type position since, I answered phones at the mortgage office where my sister worked, before I started college, but like that was about it. Most of my employment was as lab techs, and that as a graduate student, everything was in the lab. And so I think learning from other people about, I don't know, I guess in a way, how to think about these problems in perspectives that were totally unique to me, because I never worked in an office. Because, I mean, anyone can tell you a lab full of 20 something, 30 something grad students, postdocs, and technicians. I mean, it is a human resources nightmare,
Yeah.
and I mean, I'm sure just like any group of med students, residents that all just get together, you know what I mean? It's wild. And so I think from my perspective, I just appreciated getting an MBA because it forced me out of that comfort zone. It forced me to think very, very differently. And as we've been talking about, emotional intelligence and understanding body language, etc., these are things that, unless you take time to take a step out of your comfort zone and you think about those things and you learn from other people about those things, you're going to be, as you're saying, doomed to repeat the mistakes of your
Hmm.
predecessors, whether
Yep.
it's how you're allocating space in a lab or in a hospital, or how you're mentoring your students, which was how your mentor mentored you, etc.
Yep.
Like there's a lot of different negatives that come from staying just with your people and in your comfort
Yeah.
zone. And certainly I think members of our class were very good. I think they were very patient with some of us who are like, I've never worked in an office, so
How does this work? Yeah.
even like our organizational behavior class, I actually really enjoyed, because looking at it from an employee perspective,
Yeah.
because in the lab, you work your hours and then you're done, and the longer you're in the lab, the more work you're going to get done, the faster you graduate or get a paper published or whatever, so even just thinking about something like a 4 hour, like a 4 day work week, or maternity leave, or any of
Right.
these very, very basic things that in academia they're like, well, you get the baby out and you're back in what, like 4 or 6 weeks, you're back, right? And
2 weeks for me.
2
2
weeks.
weeks.
Oh my God. So I just thinking about it from that perspective, and in terms of business school, I thought was incredibly beneficial. But oh my God, 2 weeks. Oh, were you even recovered at
Yeah, it
that
was
point?
rough. It was rough. I was a fourth year resident,
Oh my gosh.
so I had to get back to work.
Mm.
2 weeks. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Thinking back, it wasn't good, but
I mean, if people had if a woman had a C-section, would she still be expected to come back after 2 weeks? Because that's like major surgery.
I mean, yeah, 2 weeks
Yeah.
would be fine.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I was still in quite a bit of pain when I went
Yeah.
back, so I was, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about what you said with the do you get nervous posting things? I sort of forgot. I used to get very, very nervous. And even doing this, I'm a little bit nervous because I have no idea like who will hear it or who will end up, and
Mm.
it's not what I usually talk about. But yeah, I used to get super nervous about how I would come across,
Mm-hmm.
especially when doing podcasts. So I the other thing I do, I tell people, is take every, like, anytime somebody offers to put you on their podcast, always accept. Always, unless they're really, really crazy,
Yeah,
like if something really off the wall.
of course.
But otherwise, always accept. It's always good. I've gone
Yeah.
on. I still get patients from like this old bone coach podcast that I did years ago.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
when I was still in my old job, I talked to this guy about bone disease and
Mhm.
parathyroid disease. And I still get, it's on his website, obviously. So I still get a few patients a year mentioning that that's how they found me.
Oh,
I'm like, okay.
that's so
So
cool.
yeah, so I tell people to do everything. But until that started happening, until I started getting people, and I think what really built up my confidence in doing that was hearing the feedback from patients, because patients would say, I heard you on this podcast and I knew I wanted you to be my surgeon.
Aw,
Like, and that's pretty positive. That's
yeah.
a really, so once you hear that a few times, like, oh, okay, like I actually sound okay, even
Mhm.
though I feel like I'm messing up and I'm pausing too much and maybe I look like an idiot. After a while, you see that, okay, it's actually okay.
Yeah.
Um, so I did feel that way initially.
My
Yeah,
goal is to always put out things that are useful, and I just never
yeah,
know what someone's going to find useful or interesting, and so that's always been my goal with this and with anything that I post. I want people to see a little bit of themselves either in me or in my guests, to
yeah,
say, okay, this person, did it. And in your case, she moved across the country with her family to a totally different state and built a private practice, from the bottom up. And that's incredibly brave. And maybe I can do that too, and I just
yeah,
always hope that that my listeners can take something away from each
yeah. I
podcast.
feel like I should have given more advice or something, but
Yeah. Well,
main advice is it's hard, but be confident.
there you go. Well, if people want to get more advice from you, Dr. Deva Boone, how can they find you?
Sure, sure. I have a website. It's my name, DevaBoone.com, I think. And then, but you can also go to my website for my business, which is southwestparathyroid.com.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a contact form. So if you hit contact, it actually will come straight to me. So you will reach me. If you're worried that you have parathyroid disease, I actually have a cool little diagnostic calculator on there, so you can put in your labs and see what it says. But yeah, and it's pretty easy to find me, to be honest. Just search my name.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Deva Boone. This was I feel like I could talk to you all day. This has been
I know, this
fascinating.
is fun. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
fun.
We should
Well, good
talk
luck.
again.
I,
Thank
I don't
you.
I don't look forward to the editing. I know you have to edit everything, but good luck with that.
Thank you.
And
That's my
and yeah, and thank you for having me on. And good luck to everybody out there.
yes, thank you. I want to thank Dr. Deva Boone again for joining me today. You can find her at her website, devaboone.com, or you can look up the Southwest Parathyroid Center. Our next episode is going to be particularly interesting because coming up is the Association of Research in Vision and Ophthalmology conference. And so we are taking the show on the road, and we're going to do some recordings and talk to people and kind of talk a little bit about the importance of conference attendance when it comes to building your career. So hope you join us then.